Welcome back. This is going to be Accounting 1. We are on Chapter 3 and we are on Section 3. In this section, we're going to be journalizing transactions that affect owner's equity and receiving cash on account. So, if you've been following along, we have been working with our 5-column journal. And I did go back through and make those darker, so if you want to double check your numbers, make sure you're good there. Okay, so just to review, when we journalize, we have 4 steps. First, we write the date, we put in the debit amount, we put in the credit amount, and finally, we list the source document or our proof that it actually happened. How do we know this happened? So the first one we're going to do is if we receive cash from sales. So I've told you before that if you have a transaction that said received cash from sales, that's going to be a revenue. And what was our source document? If you remember back to Lesson 1, cash sales, we do not record on a receipt, and we don't record that on a sales invoice. The sales invoice we only use if we have a sale on account. So the source document for this one is a tape. Remember we had the little calculator tape and we added up all of our cash sales for the day, and that's what we do instead of journalizing them all individually. So let's look at this. August the 12th, we received cash from sales of $295. It was tape number 12. So I'm going to put the 12th because we do not have to put the month because we're still in August. So we've only put that up here at the top. And we're going to look for our debit amount. We received cash from sales. So right there are our 2 accounts. We received cash. Cash is an asset. If we received cash, it's going to be a debit because it's increasing. So I know that my cash is my debit. I don't have to write cash on the line because we have a special column for cash. So I'll come over and I'll put my $295. In my debit column. Let me pause that just a minute while I fix that. Okay. If you're a true accountant, you know you should never white anything out. There's actually a correct way to correct it, but for now, that's what we're going to do. So I put my $295 as my cash debit because we received cash. So what is my credit? Well, sales credit. Sales is a revenue. Revenue is under owner's equity, and so owner's equity increases as a credit, so my sales is going to be a credit. So I need to credit sales. If I look over here, there's also a special column for sales credit. So I'm going to come down on it and put in my $295. So I have a debit, I have a credit. I'm going to put in my source information, which was T12, but am I just going to leave this blank? Well, what you're going to do is you're going to put a check mark here in the account title. That shows you that you don't need to put anything. You didn't just accidentally leave it blank. It's blank for a purpose because you didn't need that box. You're also going to come over here to your post reference. We haven't used the post reference column yet, but later on we will be moving this information to another spot, and the post reference is where did you move it to? Well, we don't need to move this individually because we're going to have it over here in our special columns. So if you've not used your general column at all, you're going to go ahead and put another check mark in the post reference. So if you use only special columns, so in this case the only thing we could do is a sales credit and opposite of a cash debit. So that's always our tape. So anytime we have sales for cash, we're just going to put check marks right in the here and here. Okay? So next one is sold services on account. It says on August the 12th, we sold services on account to Oakdale School of $350. This was sales invoice number 1. Well, sold and on account gives me my clue to what my 2 accounts are going to be. Okay, I'm going to start with the date, which is the 12th. We already had one for the 12th. That's okay. So we're going to go ahead and label this one with a 12 too. These are dates not transaction numbers. That's why we skip around. So we sold services on account. Well, if we sold something, that's an owner's equity, and so that's going to be a credit. So we want to start with our debit, so on account. So if we sold it on account, that's going to be an accounts receivable because we want to receive their money. An accounts receivable is classified as an asset. An asset's going to increase with a debit. Well, we're increasing our accounts receivable because they owe us more money. So there's our debit account. So I'm going to put here accounts receivable, and I'm going to abbreviate that. And then you put a dash and who it is. This is Oakdale School. Because you need to know who's going to be paying you later, because we want them to pay us. And then the amount is going to go in our general debit because they don't have a special column, so that's $350 debit. Okay, I'm going to look for my credit. Sold services, that's a revenue. Revenue increases as a credit. And look, over here is our sales credit column waiting for us, so that goes $350. We have a debit, we have a credit. We will put in our document number or our source for this, and that is sales invoice number 1. So the sales invoice is abbreviated with an S, so I'm going to put S1. That way, if I ever have a question, if I had recorded 350 here and 325 here, and I'm like, which one was correct? I don't remember. I know that, oh, look, I can go look at sales invoice number 1, and that's going to show me the true amount. So that's why this document number is so important. And you always record your document number at the end. That way, that kind of signals to you that, okay, I'm done with this one. I'm ready to move on. Going to the next one. In this one, we're going to pay cash for rent. So rent is an expense. So hold just a second. Okay, sorry about that. I needed to move my camera a little bit. Okay. So on August the 12th, we paid cash for rent of $300. It was check number 4. Well, the date's easy. That was the 12th again. Okay, here we know that we paid cash, so cash is going to be an account, and rent, that's going to be an account. So which one's our debit and which one's our credit? Well, I've taught you that if you pay cash, that's always a credit. So let's look at our rent. Rent is going to be an expense. So rent expense, that's an owner's equity, which normally should increase on the credit side. But remember, the expenses, we're going to keep a running total so they don't behave like they should. So rent expense is always going to be recorded as a debit. So expenses are always a debit. That's where we're going to start. There is no special account title for rent expense. So I'm going to write rent expense. And I'm going to record a general debit of $300. Okay, my credit, paid cash, that one's super easy. Go over here to the cash column in the credit and record my $300. I have a debit, I have a credit. How do I know this happened? It was check number 4, so I'm going to put C4. And that's how I record for an expense. The next transaction we're going to do. Now we're going to receive cash on account. So the people who charged to us, they bought stuff from us. We went out and fixed their computer, whatever, but they didn't pay us that day. Now they're going to pay us. So we're going to record that payment because they want to take it off the total that they owe us, and we need to record that we now have their cash. So it's the 18th. Received cash on account. So cash and on account are our two clues for what accounts we're going to use. Received cash, every time we receive cash, that's going to be a debit because we're increasing our cash. So I'm going to come over to my special columns, and there is my cash debit. So I can just put in my $200 there. I don't have to write it out. And then on account, So if they are paying us, that's going to be an asset. So it's an accounts receivable because we wanted to receive their money. So I'm going to put accounts receivable dash Oakdale School because we need to know that it was them. Okay. And since I had to write their name here, they don't have a special account. I'm going to come over here to my general credit and I'm going to credit them $200. And I have a debit, I have a credit. So my receipt was number 4 because we wrote them a receipt. So receipt number, 2. Receipt number 2. Okay, this time we are going to pay cash to the owner for personal use. So the owner wants to take some money out of the business for personal use. So in chapter 1, we recorded that straight under capital, but we've now learned that we need to actually put it in which account. Instead of capital, we're going to use the drawing account because they're making a withdrawal. So we have the date of the 18th. We paid cash and owner. Those are the 2 key words. So if we pay cash, that's going to be a cash credit. Okay, let's look for our debit then. To the owner for personal use. So that's the drawing account. The drawing account is an owner's equity account. Owner's equity accounts normally will increase on the credit side, but the drawing is one of those that we want to keep a running total of, and it does not behave the way it should because it's actually decreasing our owner's equity even though it's increasing this account. So that's going to be, our drawing is going to be a debit. And anytime we make a withdrawal, it's always going to be a drawing debit. So that's where we're starting. The owner's name is Kim Park. So it's going to be Kim Park, comma, drawing. And that's going to be a debit in the general column. So 125 debit. Now I can come over here and do my cash credit of 125. I have a debit, I have a credit, so I'm good. And this was check 6. I'm going to put C6. Now remember I told you the shortcut or the key for making sure you have it right is if you can't really remember what this drawing account, when to debit and when to credit, look and see if you have cash. We have cash involved. We paid cash. Paying cash is always a cash credit. That means that my Kim Park has to be a debit because we have to have a debit and we have to have a credit for every transaction that we do. Okay, that's going to be the end of lesson 3. Again, there's no vocabulary. There are 5 audit your understanding questions, which are basically just which columns am I using for each of these transactions. So I will see you tomorrow.